The following audio recording has been designed for learning purposes only. Do not share, distribute, or provide any type of copies, or this audio lesson will not be made available to you. Good luck with today's lesson.
For exam 1, it was an 84.2%. Very, very good. Very happy with that. That's an awesome score for our first exam. You guys and gals did a great job on that. I think the multiple choice was really, really good. The Scantron did not make hardly any noise, so that was really cool. It was interesting when I was looking at the crib sheets when they were getting turned in with the exams. Honestly, I was kind of like, ooh, I don't know. I'm not sure if these guys are going to be really happy. Based on what I saw in crib sheets. I saw some definitions. I saw a lot of white space. I just thought it was an opportunity to really get some good stuff in that crib sheet, and I didn't see a lot of that. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And then I was grading them, and I was like, wow, all right, cool. So whatever you're doing, it's good. If you feel confident with it, I feel confident with it. Admittedly, the first unit of class is kind of a review. If you had management 1010 and business 1010 already, you saw some of that stuff already. So unit 2 does get a little bit more challenging. It's like HR stuff now. So you probably haven't seen as much of it in other classes, at least the way that we present it. So I'll just at least give you that heads up. Remember, your study guide is in Canvas, and that's what you want to use when you're taking your notes. I did see a lot of students not really use the study guide as their guide for their crib sheet. I just want to remind you that that's an awesome idea. So use the study guide, make that your format for your crib sheet. You can't use the study guide itself. I mean, you can't just, plop it in there. It's not helpful. You got to fill it out. And when you make that crib sheet, then you're organizing all of that information. So, comments, questions? Silence. My analytical group is especially quiet today. What's going on, people? Any reason why we're especially quiet? Not that you're going to tell me. Well, then you're in luck, because I'm not going to talk at you all class. So that's good. You're going to do something anyway. Do something different. Is it okay if you give that back to me? Thank you, sir. Yep. Can I get your exams back, please? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, you don't keep it. Sorry. You can see it after class. Okay. If you want to. Thank you, Rachel. Whoops. Thank you. Appreciate it. Are they giving you a tough time already? Are they quote unquote worried about you? Hey, at least they acknowledge when you walk in. I mean, a lot of times students are like, oh, wait, when did you show up? That's awesome. Oops. All right, so the second unit of class is all about the rules that we have to follow. So back from our strategy diagram from chapter 3, one of the things in the circles was you had to follow the rules. And so this unit is dedicated to those rules. And I would say the HR function arguably has some of the highest regulation of any function of a company. There's a lot of accounting rules, I understand that. Not a lot of IT rules, I'm talking laws, okay? That's what I mean by rules. There are a lot of employment laws. There are definitely a lot of financial accounting laws. And so we're going to focus on the employment laws in this unit of class. So it's divided into 3 different topics. It's divided into equal employment law, bargaining and labor relations law, contracts, and then safety and health, okay? When we create HR policies and practices to attract and retain an engaged workforce, we have to do it following the rules. And so as a line manager, you have to follow these rules, and sometimes you're not even sure what they are. This is where your HR department really comes in handy, because the HR professionals are trained to know the law inside and out. And I can't even tell you how quickly the laws are changing right now. I can't keep up with it. I'm a member of our National Society for Human Resource Management, and I get emails. I get 3 emails every day, and 2 of them are specifically dedicated just to how quickly state, federal, and sometimes even local laws change in every aspect of employment. So it's everything from hiring to termination and beyond. So it covers benefits, it covers promotions, it covers training opportunities, it covers work rules, it covers health and safety. There's just so much changing. And what we're seeing happening is we're seeing, and this happens over time. Sometimes we see a lot of regulations swell up, a lot of rules, a lot of laws being written, and then sometimes we see them kind of receding and coming off the books. And so what's happened over time at a federal level with the federal laws is that we've had like a bunch of introductory laws, and then it kind of calmed down for a while, and then we had a few more, and then it calmed down for a while, and then we had a few more, and it kind of goes like that. It's tied to, at a federal level, it's tied to the administration, our federal government, what administration is in the office and what party they represent. Typically, and it's not universal, but typically Republican legislatures usually back off on rules. Democratic legislatures typically add rules. We're not going to talk about whether or not that's good or bad. What we want to focus on is just being aware of it. Here's something that we're seeing lately that is a really different thing. You know, I said like we'd ramp up laws and then it would kind of back off. Well, what we're seeing at a federal level is we're seeing federal laws back off, but we're seeing state and local laws take their place. That's really confusing. Because if you do business in 12 states and in 72 cities in those 12 states, you may have to know 72 versions of a law. That's crazy. We've never seen this before. Your HR people really are valuable. There's no way you're ever going to make that a part of your job. So we want to at least set the stage for what these laws are like, okay, in today's environment. In this unit, we're going to focus at the federal level. We're not going to focus at the state or the local level. Unfortunately, we don't have time, okay? What we are going to cover are what I consider to be these fundamental principle laws that pretty much everything else is written off of. Okay, so we're going to start that in chapter 2. So we're going to go back to the front of our book. We're going to go into chapter 2, and we're going to start with equal opportunity. Okay. Here's what I want you to think about in this unit of class. I don't care if you know the year that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act was written. It was 1964, but I only know that because I've been working in the field forever, and I learned it like 17 times when I was in college. Okay. I want you to really get your head around, what does this law do? What does it prohibit? What rights does it grant? How does it affect me as a manager? Title VII of the Civil Rights Act governs your behavior in an interview. It literally dictates the questions, the types of questions you can and cannot ask. That you need to know. You can't ask a question of somebody that asks them how many children they have. That's found to be I know, and it sounds preposterous, But that's found to be a discriminatory question. But would you believe me if I said that candidates get asked stupid, preposterous questions like that all the time still? Would it surprise you? Has anyone ever been asked what they think is an illegal question? Think about that. Maybe you have been and you didn't realize it, right? Yeah, it's crazy. So that's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about the law, the intent, and how does it affect you as a manager? What do you need to take from this? Okay? But I'm not going to stand up here and run through the laundry list of legislation. That would be super boring, and you guys would hate it, and I would hate it even more. So this is where I stop talking, and you guys are going to start working. I'm not going to go through and explain all of this law. What you're going to do is you're going to put together a quick summary of it. So I need you to be sitting with other people. So at least 3, preferably 4 people. So preferably, like if it's 4, great, stay where you're at. If it's 3, pretty good. If it's 2, you got to move. Or 1, you got to move. Sorry, I know, I keep making people move. Siba, I think you're good. I'm not sure. I think you're fine, right? You're at a table of 4? Good? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to come around to your group, and I'm going to give you basically a group of laws. Okay, I'm going to give you a group of laws. And for that group of laws, what I want you to do is I want you to tell me a couple of things. Let me just erase this because it's from the last class. So there's 3 things. You're going to get a set of regulations. And you don't have to examine, I mean, you can review each of the regulations separately. I think that's totally fine. But the set of regulations that I give you, pretty much I'm grouping it together for a reason, okay? And when you think about that set of regulations, I want you to come up with 3 things. What's the intent of that group of legislation? What is that legislation supposed to be doing? I want you to give me an example of a violation, and then I want you to say how this affects me as a manager. In other words, in my daily management duties, how would this affect me? How would it shape what I can or cannot do? I want you to, when you get your set of regulation that you're going to talk about and discuss and write some things down, you're going to take some notes and put the answers together to these 3 questions. Okay, actually, we don't even need this right now. You're just going to focus on these 3 questions. When you get to a point where you know the answer to these 3 questions, you're going to, I have the big paper, you're going to grab a big piece of paper, you're going to write the group of the regulations that you have up at the top, and you're going to put 1, your response, 2, your response, 3, your response. And if it can fit on one big sheet of paper, one of these big sticky notes, that's really all I'm after. So you're going to write the name of the legislation, what the intent is, an example of a violation, and how this affects me as a manager. And we're going to have these all over the room. And at the end of the class, what's going to happen is that you're going to have all of the information on these laws, and I'm not the one that told you. You guys are the ones that told each other what they are. And at the end of class, what I would do if I were you is I'd grab my handy-dandy smartphone, and I would take pictures of all of them. Because when you go to study outside of class, these will help you. Relisha, I'll get these in so that you can view them, okay? Okay, cool. So, see what I mean? Follow me?
Yeah, basically we help each other.
That's right.
Go home and do all of them by ourselves.
Right, right. So you got to help out your fellow student here, because if you do a crappy job on this, what are your fellow students going to say to you? Oh, man. They're going to say, what? Don't do such a crappy job on this, right? So help each other out. If you really want as much information as possible, really, really good quality information, think about that. Okay, so I'm going to be around and tell you guys where you're going to study, what you're going to prepare. And I got to go run and get big paper. Somebody's been using my big paper. But that's okay. Somebody's been using my big paper, but that's okay. Ladies, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, okay? That's your Title VII of the Civil Rights Act is what your regulation is. Okay, so folks, you have a set. There's multiple laws, but they're all grouped together, okay? The Equal Pay Act of 1963. The second law in your set is the Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967. The third one is the Vocational Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And the fourth one is the Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978. Now, that's a set of 4, but their intent and how they work is all pretty much the same, which is why I grouped them together. Follow? When you come up with an example of a violation, you do not have to come up with an example for every single one. Okay, you could say, we chose this one, and this is an example of a violation. Is that that's okay, right? Okay, good. Don't want to give you guys 4 times the work. Okay. Folks, I'm gonna throw you guys a little bit of a curveball, but I know you can handle it. I'm not gonna give you guys a law. I'm actually gonna give you guys a court case. It's cool, because this, and this is not a B-law class, but this law was pretty major. Griggs versus Duke Power. Griggs versus Duke Power. Okay. So Griggs versus Duke Power did a lot for equal employment opportunity law. So when we say intent of what was the ruling of the case, we have to kind of massage this a little bit. Cases don't have intent, cases have rulings. So what came out of Griggs that was so important? Then you can answer the violation, and then you can answer what it means for you as a manager. Make sense? Okay, you gotta do a little bit of translating, but I know you guys are up for the charge. Okay. Civil Rights Act of 1991. Just that. It's pretty big. It's kind of like a new Title VII. Yep, Civil Rights Act of 1991. Whoops. Gentlemen, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. A lot of this is chronological, so yours will come about later in the chapter. Yeah, 1. But if you can identify multiple examples, good for you. Your fellow students will thank you.
Like other than gender. So if me and you do the same equal work, we should both be paid on the same pay scale, and if there should be some meet the pay or even now, like a lot of people discriminate more. Okay, so this is for government contractors over $2,500. They need to take affirmative action and actually accommodate the person with
Yeah, even though, yes, a lot of people didn't get, just the election, she did not get elected because a lot of people didn't feel like she, as a woman, she could
because most
do the duties of, being our president, you know. So that's a good one too.
It's expensive, especially if they're in the wheelchair.
And a lot of people, because when I was in the Navy when they was going through it, half of the people was like, I don't want no woman to be our chief.
Then that's ridiculous. So he had to have a special wheelchair with a special computer.
But it's a good, that's a good.
But that's a good one.
I think you should put that
You
one
know,
first
population was straight up.
because it had a real life background because it was like a safety, you know, basically. But a lot of the viewers was like discriminating her as a, because she was a woman.
Didn't she want like that packet type of class? Like it's like I think I was just about the electrical college. Because I realized the people aren't going like, okay, the government should have a diploma.
You're not being protected for childbirth.
I feel like because
You get maternity
yeah,
leave.
I got a lot of things like 6 weeks before. But yeah, like right. Yeah,
I gotta read it. You can talk all day. I can listen to it. Not just you. Gotta read it. But, so.
Yeah.
The Bank of America didn't hire, they didn't want like
The garden.
African Americans to sue. They didn't, right? Bank of America, they didn't really hire, blacks within a company and they got sued.
There,
Discriminated a lot.
I seem to remember something, and I'm getting it confused with FCA, because FCA is literally, they are being investigated by the EEOC because their performance evaluation system unfairly treated women and minorities so that they weren't promoted at the same rate. Yeah, the same, yeah. They, and we have a term for that. It's called disparate impact. You can look it up. It's in the chapter, actually. And so the system, the HR system that we were using was impacting protected groups in a negative way. That's the definition of disparate impact. That's actually kind of a big deal because it actually comes up in our Carter's case.
You can't just hire somebody because February 23rd. How long have you been doing it?
For example, violation.
I have a legal plan, but
Hired
this
white
process,
person, somebody who's going.
what happened was, he was black, and
Or even worse, not hiring black people, white people.
I was trying to say something, but it won't come out. Our effectiveness and efficiency. Yeah. Okay, I feel like what you told us, that, about the FCA, I feel like that, number 3, I was trying to tell them, I don't know if I'm saying it right, like, by them not promoting the women and minorities, that can affect us in a lot of ways, as, getting missions done, because what if that one person they promoted, not as good as the
We know that that affects our performance, right? Our overall performance. Because if we're not promoting the people that have the highest skill and ability, we're not giving, our performance is going to suffer because of that. Our performance is also going to suffer secondarily because when we do that and employees know it, engagement suffers.
Yes.
Engagement definitely suffers.
Engagement, everything.
Sure. I mean, we're not promoting the best talent. People see that, so we're losing out because the best talent isn't in the best spot to make these decisions and do the work. And then we're losing out in a second way. Well, I mean, obviously it's legal, first of all. But then it's reputation. And today, your reputation as an employer is a really big deal. This is not 2010. We are competing for talent. Yes. Now I will.
Values, right? Ain't that kind of like,
Sure. I mean, you kind of have to take a look at what your corporate values are, and then what your culture is, and if you're living to it. But let me throw in something, and I don't know if it's a caveat or just. It's messy. It's messier than what we're making it to be right now. Because remember, anybody can bring a complaint, file charges with the EEOC. It doesn't mean that the company's guilty of it. It means that it's being investigated. And right now, we don't know what the result is. This investigation was launched probably over a year ago, and it probably won't conclude for another year because these things take an enormous amount of time. So we have to remember that as well. But for the EEOC to get involved, they must have thought at least there was enough there because they wouldn't bother investigating with their very limited resources if they didn't think it was a problem. But I will tell you, a company with very high visibility, that's very large and very well known, they'll check it out. I mean, I've heard statistics along the lines of Walmart gets sued 3,000 times a day.
Oh my God. I can believe it.
Walmart gets sued 3,000 times a day. Yeah. If you just Google like employment litigation against Walmart, you'll find one that's age discrimination because somebody who was a greeter wanted to work in another department and they wouldn't let this person, and so that was age discrimination. But I mean, it's like, and you'll see like the investigation was complete. They actually did have a finding. It's not just charges. Walmart was ordered to correct the practice or pay a fine or both or whatever it was. And I mean, but so if you look it up, I mean, you can see there's plenty of there's plenty. What do you guys think is important about Title VII to begin with? Like, what's the biggest thing about Title VII? Okay. Right, because it prohibits discrimination.
Yeah, that's basically what
It's sort of like you're like, wow, it sounds really simple. They're just trying to give everybody equal rights. You're right. You're right. Now, if you take a look at sort of like the chronology of this, the timeline of this, why is Title VII special in terms of the timeline? Yes.
Yeah.
Civil rights in the 1960s wasn't just in employment.
Right.
Actually, the Civil Rights Act isn't just an employment act. That's why we say Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act actually also established fair housing rules. So like if you went to go rent an apartment or a house, you could not be treated differently because of your race or your gender, and the list. So I mean, it's kind of a big deal.
That's what I was saying.
Big
like,
deal.
It's, so,
It's a
more
big
than
deal,
just-
isn't it?
Yeah, and
But
it's
this
more
one
than
just
just
like
like
the numbers
employment.
gave you like the right area. Like this one's for employment, this one is for.
Title VII,
Right,
yes. The
yeah.
titles specify what's going on, but if you look up the Civil Rights Act, it's actually a fairly large, comprehensive society act. But like you said, Leah, I mean, it's very much tied to what was happening in society during that time. And so, like, what equal employment laws were written before Title VII? There really wasn't. This is kind of this is what started it. I mean, there was an Equal Pay Act of 1963. You're going to see the group in the corner, Mifal's group in the corner. They have a, but it's very small. It's a very narrow scope of an act. And we're going to see that actually. What we're going to see is law starts out kind of narrow, and then depending on who's in charge at the federal level, we can kind of expand that. Yeah, it's an interesting, kind of an interesting story that we're going to tell with this. But Title VII is a big one. Like, it's the granddaddy, or grandmommy, I should say. Equal.
Do we get points for these type of in class?
This one today, not so much. This one today is different, but you have one on Tuesday that will be. So this topic, this chapter, I don't lecture on it at all. There is a narrated PowerPoint in Canvas in case you're like, I wanna do my thing, yeah.
Actually, a lot on it, and it's not that many groups, so we still gotta.
You're right. And so I'm going to announce that at the end of class, that if you want to go back and dig in, you can listen and view the narrated PowerPoints. I got to tell you, though, they're not exciting. Like, it's kind of like a little light into my world. Having a class discussion about this type of a topic is really challenging. This is a much better way to learn about this stuff than me saying Title VII, blah, blah, blah. Equal Pay Act, blah, blah, blah. Americans with Disabilities Act, blah, blah. You guys would be like, you dig into it, it's better.
Right.
Yeah. Are you guys ready for big paper? Or are you taking a break? Because the volume just went up in the classroom. Is anybody ready for big paper? Because if you are, come on up. Okay, well, one or the other. Hi, Austin. How are you today? Good. Yeah, oh, I know. I was up till 11:30 grading last night. Well, I wanted to get that, this exam and then 2800. I wanted to get week 6 in 2800 going. I'm just, here you go. Here's a marker. Yeah. And some big paper. There you go. Stick it on the wall. Here's a marker.
Stick on the wall.
Stick it on the wall. Yeah. Do well. Everybody's counting on you. Do well, right? Everybody's counting on you all. Take this last one. Take this off of it. There we go. If you want to work up front here, I think it's a lot easier vertical than putting it on your table. And there's markers here. If that works for you, that's totally fine. We can move boards and screens. It doesn't matter. I just saw my boss in the hall, and I'm like, do you think anybody would notice if I came in on a Saturday and just painted all of the walls with white, like in the whiteboard finish? Like in some companies, all the walls are whiteboard finish. So they're like this. And so you can just go up to a wall and write. I'm like, that's what I need.
Yeah.
Love it. I would love it. I wanted it when they renovated C Building, and they looked at me like I was from Mars. They were like, but then they're going to write on the walls. I'm like, that's the point. I want people to write on the walls. And they're like, we can't have that. I'm like, that's ridiculous. You people are ridiculous.
The lawsuit and the.
Yeah. And the wrenches, like the whole hiring wrenches, the whole following along,
I got you.
How's it going here? I know you guys had a little bit of a curveball, but I know you're up for the task.
You got no one?
I see. So there's a management term that we use when we see people who are really like gelling and getting stuff done. It's called synergy. Are you guys like getting stuff done and having maybe a little bit of tiny fun at the same time? It's not so. It's not so bad.
You're welcome.
See, these guys were like dogging you 10 minutes ago, and now you're the man. Now you're the man. We can move that. All right, make it count. Make sure you got some good stuff on there, right? Make sure you got some good stuff. Left-handers are notorious for not writing in straight lines. I've gotten better with age. In my years of teaching, your printing is ridiculously neat. That's crazy. And then I just kind of don't care after a while. I'm like, whatever. I don't write that much on whiteboards anyway. I'm not being evaluated for my quality of writing on a whiteboard. It's probably all the other stuff I do. When you guys are ready. No rush. Well, that's the cool thing. You can take them down and put them back up where you want. I'm telling you guys, one day you're going to walk in here and all the walls are going to be covered in whiteboard paint. I'm doing it. I might get fired for it, so if you see it, don't tell them I did it, okay? Yeah. Yeah. No, there are companies that have it. Yeah. Yes, so it's a paint and it dries like the surface of a whiteboard. But it's obviously got the wall texture as a part of it, and so it's totally erasable. So like if you walk into a company like Quicken Loans or United Shore, or lots of different companies, you'll have like these spaces. They're white spaces, and everybody, and it goes along with open office environments, open work environments, and you see people that need to collaborate. They're working on a work problem and they need to collaborate. They pop up. And there's like little, containers of markers and erasers, and they pop up and they just start writing and they start drawing and they start working on a problem.
Certain markers or just Expo?
Dry erase, Expo markers.
My whole card's not being whiteboard.
I mean, it would be amazing to have that.
I'm about to do my prep then. Do they have it at Myers?
Probably. They probably do. When they renovated the building, I asked them to do it, and they looked at me like I was alien. They were like, no, they're going to write on the walls. I'm like, that's what we're aiming for, though. How cool would that be? And they were like, you can't let your students write on the walls. I'm like, they're gonna anyway. Guess what? Because just like a whiteboard. Just like a whiteboard. Yeah, it's awesome. It's great. How much creativity would that spark, like in a classroom, when you're like working on something, and you guys are working on something, all you have to do is be like, boop, boop, Yeah. I think even more than a monitor where you could plug in a computer. Like that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I should just come in on a Saturday or a Sunday and just do it. It has to be a Saturday though, because Sundays the buildings are locked. I'm saying this and I'm being recorded.
Oh, that records you?
Yeah. So it's all right. Sam won't tell anybody. Sam knows me. Yes. In this class I do, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've had it before. Yeah. Yeah.
My teacher, when we were in middle school, did our desks whiteboard paint.
Sweet. That would be, yeah, but your parents probably hated you because you guys all came home with like marker all over you. What age? Elementary? Like what, middle school? Oh, just as bad.
Tables like this, they would all have whiteboard paint on them.
Just as bad. Kids in middle school are sometimes worse than elementary school kids. Middle school really is the armpit of,
I'm not intrigued.
yeah.
Right.
So when we stand up there, how are we gonna like?
See, I know you're writing and not me because if I, it's like, where are you writing on? Right. Yeah. Yeah. You know. Yeah. What am I doing that? She didn't give us a warning?
I'm sorry. You actually have to get up.
Second one said health,
Okay.
health and employment practice promotion.
Krista's got it all under control.
You just like literally like just changing one word. That's the whole thing. That's the whole business. You're good.
I'll get you a marker. You can catch. Stick it up on the wall. It's much easier. Well, I won't say it's easier on the wall, but it is. Okay, well then keep it on the table. It's fine. Keep it on the table then.
You're like, I'm just gonna put it up.
I'm gonna feel it anyway. Is that not great, right? We're good.
You guys are funny. If you wanted to get a job, or if you wanted to be, if you wanted to apply for a loan, I mean, it was a lot of different practices that we as a society were saying, from a legislative perspective, we're going to protect these rights for individuals. But of course, we're in an HR management class, so we're going to focus on the employment one. So ladies, what's the big deal about Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Why is it such a big deal?
Gives everybody like equal opportunity.
Right. And what employment laws really had an impact before Title VII? None. So this act really started it. So the intent is pretty simple, isn't it? The intent of the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act was really just to afford people the same opportunity. And it didn't matter based on their gender or their skin color, their race, their ethnicity, their national origin. And so that was actually it was groundbreaking at the time. We sort of, the further we get from 1964, of course, we think, well, yes, of course. But as we were talking up here in the front, are there violations that are being charged by the EEOC right now that violate this act? Could you find first of all, let me ask you the question. What would be an example of, a violation of this law?
The FCA discriminating.
Tell the class about this. What was going on?
Basically, they wasn't like allowing minorities or women to be able to, be in higher positions.
To be promoted. So there's actually a case right now that the EEOC has with Fiat Chrysler that the EEOC charges that FCA is violating Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because they claim that the performance management system, how you review people and how you make promotion decisions, unfairly treats women and minority employees at the organization and therefore results in lower percentages, lower rates of promotion of women and minorities at FCA. Now, it's still being investigated. There has not been a settlement. There has not been any type of answer as to whether or not it's happening. And so one of the things we have to keep in mind is it's still being investigated, so we can't say FCA is absolutely guilty of this yet. If the EEOC does find that FCA violated Title VII, they could impose fines. They could require them to change their performance management system and prove to the EEOC that it no longer treats people in protected classes differently. So Title VII established the whole idea of a protected class. Title VII, or really the Civil Rights Act, but Title VII from an employment perspective said, hey, listen, these groups of people don't get treated the same in society when it comes to employment opportunities, and so we're going to write a law that requires employers to do that. And that was really groundbreaking at the time, okay? And you can go into Chapter 2 and you can literally see what Title VII covers. It covers pretty much the span of any employment decision you would make. It's access to employment, hiring, training, orientation, performance feedback, promotion, benefits, compensation, and even when we let people go. We cannot treat people differently on the basis of race, gender, national origin, ethnicity. There's a whole list, okay? There's one group of individuals that is not listed in that law today. And it's not, we're kind of going through the court system to figure out if they will be added as a protected class. And right now, LGBTQ status is not part of that law, okay? Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting because there are many states, there are many cities that do prohibit discrimination on that basis, and additionally, there are many organizations that are committed to treating people in this category equal, okay? So this is where it gets a little interesting, right? Because you really have to know some of this detail, okay? So it's actually, I mean, it affects management across the board. I mean, it's just the entire lifespan of the relationship with the employee. And it's everything from a big performance management system at FCA that doesn't result in promotion rates to being, equitable between protected groups of people, but it gets down to like the nittiest grittiest detail on like what question you ask somebody in an interview. I had a supervisor at the insurance company that I worked at who used to ask every woman how many children she had and if she had her own way to get to work, if she had her own car to get to work. And those two questions are textbook not allowed. They are textbook red flag. Anybody who's taken an HR class knows that you are not allowed to ask women how many children they have and if they can drive themselves to work and if they have to pick up their kids every day. And Janet used to ask all of the female candidates this question until Angela told her she couldn't anymore. And she said, well, Angela, why not? And I said, because it's an illegal form of discrimination, which I find it funny because she's a woman and she's asking women this. And she says, well, I need the file clerks. This was back in the day, no judging. I need the file clerks to be here. There were people that you hired in an organization that actually filed paper. I know it's crazy. And so, some people are like, what? So she says, but I need my clerks to be here. And I can't hire somebody if they have 2 babies and they're going to be out sick all the time with their sick babies. Ouch. Yeah. Ouch. Ouch. Janet wasn't allowed to interview anybody by herself. Yeah. Angela always sat in the interviews with Janet. Janet hated it. Okay, so that was a thing. So this really started it. Now, what we're going to see as we go through some of these, we're not going to get through all of this today, But we're going to go on to our next group, which is a group of laws, which is the Equal Pay Act, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, the Vocational Rehabilitation Act, and the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. So those are four, like, I'm going to call them little laws. They're not as wide as sweeping as Title VII, but they pretty much do the same thing, don't they, folks? They prohibit discrimination in pretty much every aspect of employment. But what do? They add to the protected groups that Title VII established. So Title VII established protected groups based on gender and race and ethnicity. So what these four laws did was they added groups to that protected status. So they added pay with gender specifically. They added pregnancy as a status. So you couldn't fire a woman just because she was pregnant, just because you felt she couldn't do the job, because that's what used to happen. Back in the 1960s, somebody would walk in and say, oh, look, I'm having a baby, and they'd be like, bye. That sounds preposterous, doesn't it? I mean, we giggle, it sounds preposterous, but that's actually what happened.
How would you react if that affects the job?
So I think what you need to do is, if you have somebody who is pregnant, who's working in a job where the physical ability of the job is a bona fide thing, first of all, you got to talk to your HR people about it, right? Secondly, you analyze that job. We're going to learn that in Unit 3. You analyze that job very carefully to make sure you know, without a doubt, what that job requires in terms of its physical abilities, and you know something about what that person is able to do. People, there are women who run marathons at 8 months. So it's got to be a pretty big deal for a pregnant woman not to be able to do something physical at work. I'm not kidding. You can look it up. There are women who run marathons and they are 8 months pregnant. I got a lady at Orange Theory. She's like busting my ass every time running on the treadmill. I'm like, you're gonna have a kid like in 3 weeks, and she's like, yeah. And I hate her. So here I am, no kid. I'm like, ugh. Anyway, I digress. So, but we have to look at the job. And you're going to hear that come up as a theme. You always got to look at the job. You got to analyze the job. You got to look at the job. Why? Because it's objective. And if you're not looking at the job, you're not being objective, you run the risk of being accused of unfairly or illegally discriminating against somebody. Okay? One interesting thing about the Vocational Rehabilitation Act, which is a mouthful to say, it was actually the country's first attempt at prohibiting discrimination on the basis of disability. But it was really narrow, because there's another law that's much more broad in scope, but the VRA actually was very narrow, and it only applied to government contractors at the time. And that's something about legislation, how it gets written. If we can't pass sweeping legislation, what we do is we make it apply to government contractors, and we kind of see how that goes. And if it becomes acceptable in the government contractor world, then if the administration in power is the right one that, will pass the law, then we'll pass the law. And that's exactly what we saw with the Americans with Disabilities Act. But that took us like 20 years to get there. So it's not like right away. So some of these things is about changing culture and about changing mindset, which is kind of interesting. So that's our second group. What came first? Griggs. So I want to turn your attention, this is the last one I'll do. This is on our stop of equal employment law. This is actually not a law, right? What is it? It's a court case. So you might know that when law gets written, you probably know this if you took B-Law, right? When law gets written, legislators really don't have any idea how it's going to be enforced. That's actually how laws are written. And then laws get enforced by the agencies that then write the enforcement rules. And then if there's any gray area in the enforcement rules, those gray areas get resolved through our court system. And so one of the things that happened with employment discrimination law is that we really weren't sure how much an employer's intent really mattered. We got to a point where we were kind of questioning, like, if the employer intends to discriminate, is it illegal? Or is the effect of the discrimination illegal? And this is one of those things that just evolves out of law. And so there was a court case, this was in the 60s as well, wasn't it? Or was it in the 70s? 60s. So this came about some years after Title VII. And it was really revolutionary because the case itself, what it did was Griggs was a man who worked at Duke Power Company, or he was a man who tried to work at Duke Power Company. Duke Power Company is a utility. It's in the South, in the Southeast. And Mr. Griggs wanted to work at Duke Power, and Mr. Griggs didn't have a high school degree. He didn't have a high school diploma, and he was turned down for the job. And what job was it? It was a coal handler. So Duke Power had a policy, a hiring policy that said that you have to have a high school diploma if you want to work at Duke Power, okay? Well, it was problematic because what happened was that it was found that having a high school diploma has no bearing on whether or not Griggs or anybody else could effectively be a coal handler at Duke Power. This was huge. So Duke Power, in their defense, said, hey, we didn't intend to do this. We didn't intend to discriminate. This is not an illegal form of discrimination. And what the result of the court case said was, you did illegally discriminate even if you didn't intend to. That was big. That was like all of these other actions now that are covered under the law that employers didn't have to worry about before, that now they have to take into consideration. You mean that we could get sued and found guilty of illegal discrimination even if we didn't intend to? Even if you didn't intend to. What we call that is disparate impact. Disparate impact, you're going to see it in your chapter. And it's actually, I want you to make a note of it because disparate impact comes up in your Carter's case. So disparate impact is an illegal form of discrimination. And it says, basically, if your practice unfairly affects a protected group, it's an illegal form of discrimination. You might not have intended for it to happen that way, but it did, and it's an illegal form of discrimination. So as I was talking with the folks over here who did all of this great work, I said everything's got to be related to the job, because you brought up a really good question even about the pregnancy thing, right? How do you know? I mean, how do you know if it's illegal or not? You have to look at the job. You have to analyze the job. You have to know the ins and outs of that job. So you have to know if your policies, practices, and procedures negatively impact a protected group. So you actually have to do some statistical analysis to see if they do or they don't. That actually gets us back to the FCA. The FCA case, it's a case of disparate impact. Like the FCA didn't intend to, but that was big because before this case, the only form of illegal discrimination was one that was intentional. Griggs said, no, even unintentional discrimination is illegal discrimination. Isn't that, I mean, you guys might not think that's big. But that was a really big deal back in the day. Okay, I'm going to save these. I'm going to take pictures of them. I'll throw them in Canvas. We'll finish up with our last two. We're going to talk about sexual harassment on Tuesday. It's going to be a barrel of fun. Sorry. I was actually kind of being serious. Can you tell I nerd out about this stuff? I mean, this is like, you got to know this stuff. And then you're going to do something with it. So you have an in-class assignment on Tuesday. Okay, so you take your stuff, you go. I'm going to take pictures. These will end up in Canvas. You keep working on those study guides and reading Chapter 2. We'll pick up where we left off Tuesday. Have a fabulous weekend.
Good luck with today's lesson.